Long ago, before anyone had ever heard of the Snow Queen, the world was bright and full of laughter. In one little town, children played in the streets, flowers bloomed in every garden, and neighbors smiled at one another. It seemed like nothing could ever disturb their joy. But far away, in a dark corner of the world, two mischievous trolls worked on something wicked. They built a mirror. Not a normal mirror, but a cursed one. This mirror was full of lies and tricks. If you looked into it, you would not see beauty. You would see ugliness. If you looked at kindness, you would see anger. If you looked at love, you would see hate. The mirror turned everything good into something bad. The trolls laughed and laughed at their creation. They carried it high into the sky, hoping to show it off to the angels above. But the mirror slipped from their hands. It fell and shattered into 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000 tiny pieces. Each piece of glass was as sharp as ice, and each one still held the mirror's terrible power. The wind carried the shards across mountains, rivers, and cities. Some pieces flew into people's eyes, and those eyes could no longer see kindness or beauty. Some shards pierced hearts, and those hearts grew cold and hard as stone. In that little town of laughter and light lived two children, a boy named Kay and a girl named Gerda. They were not brother and sister, but they loved each other as if they were. Every day they played together in the garden, caring for the roses that grew between their houses. Their hearts were warm, their friendship true. But the one winter day, when the snow was falling softly, a tiny piece of the wicked glass found Kay. It slid into his eye, and another pierced his heart. He cried out for just a moment, then stood strangely still. From that day on, Kay began to change. He no longer saw beauty in the roses he once cared for. He no longer heard the kindness in Gerda's voice. Instead, he saw the world as cruel, ugly, and cold. He teased Gerda. He pushed away her love. He laughed at what once made him happy. Gerda worried, but she did not stop caring for him. She whispered to herself, "This is not my Kay. Something is wrong. Something terrible has touched his heart." Winter grew deeper, and the nights grew longer. One evening, when children were playing in the snow with their sleds, Kay joined them. He rayed and laughed, but his laughter was sharp and strange. Then, through the falling snow, a grand sleigh appeared. It was larger, brighter, and more magical than any sled the children had ever seen. Sitting inside was a tall woman dressed in white, her crown shining with ice crystals. Her eyes were clear as frozen glass, her beauty sharp and cold. She was the Snow Queen. The other children stepped back in fear, but Kay's eyes lit up. He tied his little sled to the back of her sleigh, and when the Snow Queen turned her gaze on him, she smiled a chilling smile. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. That kiss froze away the last bit of warmth in his heart. The Snow Queen lifted him into her sleigh, and without a sound, the winds carried them both away into the endless winter night. And so, Kay was gone. Gerda searched for him in the streets, in the gardens, and by the river, but he was nowhere to be found. The townsfolk whispered that he was lost forever in the snow. But Gerda did not believe it. She pressed her hands against her chest, holding back tears, and whispered, "I will not give up. I will find him. No matter how far the snow carries him, I will bring Kay home." But how could a small girl chase a queen of ice? How could she face the frozen winds and the dark forests beyond her little town? The story of her journey was only beginning. In the little town, before the Snow Queen's sleigh appeared, Kay and Gerda had been the happiest of friends. They lived in two small houses that stood side by side. Between their windows was a box filled with roses, and every morning the children would climb up to water them. The roses were their pride and joy. They cared for them as if they were treasures. Kay was clever and full of jokes. He always found ways to make Gerda laugh. Gerda was gentle and kind. She had a soft voice, and her smile warmed every heart around her. Together, they were never lonely. If one was sad, the other would cheer them up. If one was tired, the other would wait and share the load. In summer, they sat beneath the roses, weaving stories about the clouds. Kay would say, "That one looks like a dragon," and Gerda would answer, "No, it's a castle with a princess inside." In winter, when snowflakes danced outside, they pressed their faces to the frosted glass and planned games for the spring. They were more than friends. They were like brother and sister, joined by love that everyone could see. But after the shards of the wicked glass struck Kay, everything began to change. Gerda noticed first. When she showed him the roses they had tended together, Kay only frowned. "They are ugly," he said coldly. "They are just common flowers. Why should I care?" Gerda's eyes filled with tears. "But Kay, they are our roses. Don't you remember?" Kay only laughed, but it was not his old laughter. It was sharp and cruel. He began to find faults in everything around him. If someone sang a song, he mocked it. If a child built a snowman, he kicked it down. He looked at people with cold eyes, as if no kindness could ever reach him. Gerda's heart ached. She whispered to the roses, "This is not my Kay. He is still inside somewhere. I know it." Still, she did not leave his side. She followed him even when he turned away. She spoke softly when he grew angry. She forgave him when he was unkind. Deep inside, she believed the boy she loved like a brother was still there. But Kay's heart was no longer his own. The shard of glass had turned it hard and ice. Day by day, he grew colder, until the town hardly remembered the joyful boy he had once been. One snowy evening, Kay pressed his nose to the frosted window and saw the white flakes falling like feathers from the sky. A strange light sparkled in his eyes. "Look at the patterns," he said. "They are more perfect than any rose. The snow never lies. The snow is pure." Gerda shivered. She could not explain why, but she felt that the snow was calling him away from her, and soon her fear would come true. The winter that year was colder than anyone in the little town could remember. The snow did not fall in gentle flakes, but in sharp, glittering storms that whistled down the streets. The children still played outside, dragging their sleds across the ice, but they shivered under heavy scarves and mittens. Kay was among them, proud of his fast little sled. He laughed as he raced down the lanes, yet his laughter was no longer warm and joyful. It was sharp, hollow, and cold, like the sound of breaking glass. Gerda watched him sadly, wondering if her dear friend would ever return to the boy she had once known. One afternoon, as the children gathered in the square to race, the air suddenly changed. The wind stopped howling. The flakes of snow slowed, hanging in the air as if time itself had paused. The children turned their heads in wonder. Something strange was coming. Out of the swirling mist appeared a sleigh, larger and grander than any they had seen before. Its runners gleamed like silver, and its sides sparkled with patterns of frost. A tall white horse pulled it, moving gracefully through the snow without a sound. Seated in the sleigh was a woman unlike any other. She was tall, wrapped in a cloak of white fur that glittered with ice. Her hair was long and pale as moonlight, and on her head rested a crown made of sharp, shining crystals. Her eyes were bright, clear, and cold, like frozen lakes. She was beautiful, but in a way that made the children tremble. Some ran back to their homes in fear. Others whispered, "Who is she?" But Kay stood still, staring in awe. To him, she was more perfect than the roses he once loved, more dazzling than the sunlight on fresh snow. The sleigh passed by, and Kay's little sled seemed to move on its own, pulled after it. Without hesitation, he tied his rope to the sleigh's back and was carried along. The children called out, "Kay, stop! Come back!" But he only laughed, his voice lost in the icy wind. The sleigh carried him beyond the town, out into the wide, white fields. The snow grew deeper, the wind sharper. Still, Kay held on, his eyes fixed on the grand sleigh. At last, the sleigh stopped in the middle of the frozen plain. The woman turned her head, and her eyes fell on Kay. For a long moment, she studied him. Then she stepped down. The snow did not sink beneath her feet. It was as if even the earth itself bowed to her presence. She leaned close, her voice soft but chilling. "Why do you follow me, little one?" Kay's lips trembled, but not with fear. "Because you are the most perfect thing in the world," he said. The shard of glass in his heart and eye made him believe it. The woman bent down and kissed him lightly on the forehead. At once, a freezing stillness spread through his body. His warm memories of home, his love for Gerda, even the joy of the roses, all of it vanished in an instant. His heart grew colder than ice. The woman smiled faintly. She was the Snow Queen. "Come with me, Kay," she said. "Come to my palace of snow. There you will learn the secrets of ice and eternity." Without a word, Kay climbed into her sleigh. The Snow Queen lifted her hands, and the storm rose again. Snow whirled around them, covering their path. The horse leapt forward, and in a blink, they vanished into the endless winter night. Back in town, Gerda sat by the window, her small hands pressed together. The snow fell thick and heavy, but she would not move. "Kay," she whispered, "where are you?" The storm gave her no answer, and so Kay was taken, carried away in the cold arms of the Snow Queen, far from the warmth of love, far from Gerda's world. The town was not the same after Kay vanished. His mother searched every corner of the streets, calling his name. The neighbors shook their heads and whispered sadly he must have fallen into the river or been lost in the storm. But Gerda did not believe it. She sat by the roses they had once cared for and cried, her tears falling on the frozen petals. "He is not gone forever," she whispered. "I know he is alive. My heart tells me so." The days grew longer, the snow deeper. No word of Kay ever came. Yet every morning, Gerda rose and asked the same question. "Where is Kay?" One evening, she took her little red shoes and went to the riverbank. She thought, perhaps the river knows where he is. She climbed into a small boat and whispered, "Please, take me to Kay." The boat slipped away from the shore. Gerda, too small to guide it, could only hold on as the current carried her farther and farther. She felt both frightened and brave. She did not know where she was going, but her heart was strong. The river brought her to a garden full of flowers that bloomed even though it was winter. The garden belonged to a kind sorceress, a woman with gentle eyes who welcomed Gerda warmly. "Stay here, child," the sorceress said. "The flowers will comfort you. You need not search anymore." For a while, Gerda felt safe. The flowers whispered sweet songs. The sun shone warmly, and she almost forgot her sorrow. But one day she asked the flowers, "Have you seen my friend Kay?" Each flower told her a story, but none spoke of Kay. At last, she realized the garden was trying to make her forget. With tears in her eyes, she ran to the gate. "I cannot stay here. Kay is waiting for me. I must go on." The world outside was wide and strange. She walked for many days, her shoes worn thin, her hands red from the cold. She asked every bird she saw, every person she met, "Have you seen my friend, Kay?" But no one knew. One evening, she met a crow with bright black eyes. He tilted his head and said, "I have heard of a boy taken north in a grand sleigh. Perhaps it was your Kay." Gerda's heart leapt. The crow told her of a palace where a prince and princess lived, and how a boy had been seen there. Gerda hurried to the palace, hoping, praying. The prince and princess received her kindly. They listened to her story with gentle hearts, but sadly, the boy she sought was not Kay. Still, they gave her warm clothes, boots, and a golden carriage to help her continue her journey. Gerda thanked them with tears of gratitude. "I will not stop," she said. "I will find Kay." Her path was hard. Thieves lurked in the forest. Snow covered the roads. Her little hands often trembled, but she never turned back. Deep inside, she carried a flame that no winter storm could put out, the flame of love for her friend. The world told her Kay was gone, but Gerda had made her decision. She would search every river, every forest, every icy plain. No matter how far, no matter how long, she would not rest until she brought him home. Her brave journey had only just begun. Gerda's journey was not easy. She was only a small girl with no map, no strength, and no magic to guide her. Yet her love for Kay gave her courage. Each morning she rose, whispered his name, and stepped forward into the unknown. The river had carried her far. The garden of the sorceress had tempted her to stay, and the kind prince and princess had given her warm clothes and a golden carriage. Now, with these gifts, Gerda traveled deeper into the world, asking every bird and every breeze, "Have you seen Kay?" The golden carriage glittered in the sunlight. People turned their heads as it rolled past, for it looked like it belonged to a queen. But this treasure soon drew the wrong kind of attention. From the dark woods, shadows stirred. Robbers lurked between the trees, their eyes shining with greed. Before long, the carriage was surrounded. Rough voices shouted, and strong hands dragged Gerda down. Her fine clothes and shining coach made her look like a prize. The robbers laughed, thinking they had caught a little princess. But when Gerda told them she was only a child searching for her friend, most of them only sneered. Only one listened, the robber girl. She was wild, with tangled hair and sharp eyes that glimmered like fire. She carried a knife and spoke with a bold voice. "She is mine," the robber girl declared. "Do not harm her. I want her as my friend." And so Gerda was spared. That night, as the robbers feasted, the robber girl sat beside her, curious. "Tell me why you wander so far," she demanded. Gerda's voice was soft but steady. She told the girl about Kay, about the roses, about the Snow Queen's sleigh. She spoke of her journey, the river, the garden, the crow, the prince and princess, and how her heart would not let her give up. The robber girl frowned, yet her eyes softened. "You are foolish," she said, "but brave. I like you, little one," she led Gerda to the back of the hall where animals were kept in cages, doves that cooed sadly, a reindeer with wide, dark eyes, and a few restless dogs. The reindeer stamped his hooves and bent his head low, as if he understood. "This reindeer," the robber girl explained, "has run across the snowy plains of the north. He knows the way to the Snow Queen's palace." Gerda's heart leapt. "Please," she begged, "let me ride him. He can take me to Kay." The robber girl scowled as though she were angry at her own heart. She waved her knife and cut the ropes that bound the reindeer. "Go then, take her north, but don't you dare die on the way." Gerda hugged the wild girl tightly, surprising her. "Thank you. I will never forget you." The reindeer lifted Gerda onto his back and leapt into the snowy night. The stars glittered above, and the cold wind cut across the plain. Yet Gerda held tight, whispering Kay's name into the wind. The reindeer carried her far, through forests and frozen fields. Along the way, they found kindness from strangers. An old woman in Lapland gave Gerda food and furs. Another woman in Finland warmed her by the fire and whispered, "The Snow Queen's palace is near. Only a pure heart can melt the ice there." Each meeting gave Gerda strength. Though she was tired, though her cheeks were red with frost, her courage grew. She saw that the world was wide and filled with both danger and kindness, and she learned that even in the darkest places, love could shine like a small flame. Still, the journey was long. The wind howled, the snow burned her skin, and the nights seemed endless. Many times she wanted to weep, but each time she pressed her hands together and whispered, "Kay is waiting. I must not stop." Through gardens, palaces, robber camps, and snow-swept plains, Gerda had faced many trials, and with every step, she came closer to the frozen palace where he, our friend, lay trapped. Her love was her guide. Her courage was her strength. The final part of her journey was near. The robber camp was dark and noisy, filled with the crackle of fire and the sound of rough laughter. Gerda sat close to the robber girl, who was unlike anyone she had ever met. Her hair was wild, her clothes torn, and she carried a sharp little knife that she spun between her fingers with ease. Her eyes, though fierce, held a spark of curiosity. "You are strange," the robber girl said, staring at Gerda. "Why would anyone travel so far for just one boy? There are many boys in the world." Gerda shook her head. Her voice trembled, but her words were firm. "Kay is not just any boy. He is my dearest friend. I cannot live without him." The robber girl tilted her head. You are either very foolish or very brave." She gave a crooked smile. "I think I wanna like you." Around them, the robbers feasted on meat and bread. The fire crackled, casting shadows across the hall. In one corner, animals were kept, pigeons in cages, dogs chained to the wall, and a large reindeer tied with heavy ropes. The reindeer's eyes were gentle but full of sorrow. Gerda looked at him with hope. "He could take me to the north," she whispered. The robber girl noticed her gaze. "Ah, you've spotted him. That reindeer knows the way to the Snow Queen's palace. He has run across the wide, icy plains." She leaned close, lowering her voice. "But he is ours now. He will never run free again." Gerda's eyes filled with tears. "Please," she begged softly, "I must reach Kay. Without help, I will never find him." For a moment, the robber girl said nothing. She twirled her knife, frowning as if fighting a battle inside herself. Then she laughed suddenly. "You silly girl! You make me feel soft, and I do not like it." But even as she said it, her eyes softened. She jumped up, marched over to the reindeer, and cut his ropes with her knife. "Gonta," she ordered, "take her away before I change my mind." Gerda gasped, and with joy, she hugged the robber girl tightly, and for once, the wild child did not pull away. "Thank you," Gerda whispered. The robber girl pushed her back roughly, hiding her feelings. "Don't thank me. Just promise you will find your Kay. And remember, if you die in the snow, I will be very angry." With the help of the robber girl, Gerda climbed onto the reindeer's back. The reindeer stamped his hooves and lifted his head proudly. He had longed for freedom, and now he would carry Gerda to the frozen north. The robber girl stood watching as they disappeared into the night, her knife gleaming in the firelight. "Go on, silly girl," she muttered. "Let's see if love can truly melt ice." The reindeer galloped across the snowy plains. The wind howled, and the stars sparkled like icy lanterns above. Gerda held tightly to his neck, whispering Kay's name again and again. Her heart was full of hope. She knew she was closer than ever to finding him. Behind her, in the robber camp, the wild girl sat quietly by the fire. Though she would never admit it, a strange warmth had touched her heart that night. The warmth of kindness, the power of true friendship. And so, with the robber girl's gift of freedom, Gerda's journey continued. The path was still long, and the Snow Queen's palace waited far to the north, cold and terrible. But now, Gerda was not alone. She had courage, she had love, and she had a reindeer to carry her through the endless snow. The reindeer carried Gerda through endless nights of snow. The stars above twinkled like icy candles, and the moon lit their path across wide, white plains. The wind bit at her cheeks, but she held on tightly, whispering, "Kay, I am coming." At last, after many days, they saw it, rising from the horizon like a dream carved out of ice, the Snow Queen's palace. It was vast, glittering, and terrifying. Its walls were made of snow piled higher than mountains, polished smooth until they shone like glass. Towers of ice stretched into the sky, sharp and bright as crystal spears. No palace on earth had ever looked so beautiful or so cold. The reindeer stopped far away, trembling. "I cannot go closer," he said softly. "The air is too heavy with frost. My strength will fail." Gerda slid down and stroked his neck. "You have brought me far, dear friend. Rest now. I must go on alone." With small steps, she walked across the frozen plain toward the palace. The gates loomed tall, made of swirling snow and ice. They opened with a groan, as if the palace itself were alive. Inside, everything sparkled. Walls, floors, and ceilings of frozen light. But there was no warmth, no fire, no beating heart. Only silence, deep and endless. Room after room stretched before her, each grander than the last. Some halls were wide as forests, others narrow as caves. The light of the northern sky streamed through walls of ice, casting rainbow colors that dazzled her eyes. Yet none of this beauty could ease the chill that sank into her bones. At the heart of the palace, in the largest hall of all, Gerda finally found him, Kay. He sat alone on the frozen floor, dressed in white, his lips pale as snow. Before him lay sharp shards of ice, which he moved with stiff fingers, trying to form patterns. He worked silently, endlessly, as though under a spell. His eyes were empty, his face cold. It was as if a life had been drained away. Gerda rushed forward. "Kay, it is me, Gerda. I have found you." But Kay did not move. He did not smile, nor even blink. He did not know her. The shard of glass in his heart and eye had stolen every memory, every feeling. Gerda fell to her knees beside him. She touched his hands. They were as cold as ice itself. "Oh, Kay," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "What have they done to you?" All around her, the palace walls glistened. The silence grew heavy, pressing against her chest. She could almost feel the Snow Queen's presence, though the queen herself was not there. It was as if her cold spirit filled every corner of the hall. For a moment, Gerda's courage faltered. She was just a small girl, and the Snow Queen was mighty. Could love alone be enough? Could her tears melt the ice that bound Kay's heart? Gerda clasped her hands and prayed softly. Her tears fell, warm and bright, onto Kay's chest. One drop slipped into his frozen heart. Another fell against his cheek. They shone like tiny stars against the cold ice. Kay shivered. His stiff fingers trembled. A crack appeared in the ice that held his heart. Gerda leaned closer, crying harder. "Kay, please? Remember me? Remember the roses, the summers, the games we played. Remember our friendship, our love. Please come back to me. The shards of ice before him slipped from his hands. His eyes blinked slowly, as if waking from a long dream. A sigh escaped his lips. The spell was breaking. But would it be enough? Gerda's warm tears fell again and again onto Kay's frozen chest. At first, he did not move. His lips were pale, his eyes empty. But then, slowly, he began to tremble. His stiff body shivered, as though a crack had opened inside the ice that bound him. One tear slid into his heart, melting the shard of glass that had pierced it so long ago. Another touched his eyes, washing away the splinter that had blinded him. Kay blinked. His gaze cleared, and for the first time in many months, he saw Gerda, not as a stranger, not as an annoyance, but as the friend he had loved since childhood. Gerda. His voice was faint, but real. His lips curved into a small smile. It is you, Gerda laughed through her tears. She hugged him tightly, warming him with her arms. Yes, Kay, it's me. I found you. The ice shards around them tumbled to the floor, their patterns broken. The spell that had bound him was gone. Kay pressed his hand to his chest, feeling his heart beat once more. It's warm, he whispered, amazed. My heart is warm again. Gerda nodded, because love is stronger than ice. Together they rose. The grand icy hall seemed less frightening now, as if the Snow Queen's power had weakened. Her cold silence no longer held Kay. He was free. The palace walls still glittered with frozen beauty, but to Kay, they no longer seemed perfect. They were only empty, cold walls of snow. He turned to Gerda, tears in his eyes. You came all this way for me? Yes, she said firmly. I promised I would never give up, and I never will. Hand in hand, they walked out of the palace. The gates opened silently, and the cold wind no longer stung their skin. Instead, the air seemed lighter, filled with a new kind of brightness. The reindeer was waiting faithfully at the edge of the plain. He bowed his head and carried them both away from the frozen land. As they traveled south, the nights grew shorter, and the sun began to warm the earth again. Snow melted into rivers. Rivers fed the grass, and flowers began to bloom. At last, Gerda and Kay returned to their little town. The roses between their houses were still there, waiting for them. Their colors were bright, their petals soft. Gerda and Kay knelt together and touched the flowers gently. Kay looked at Gerda with tears in his eyes. How could I have forgotten this? How could I have forgotten you? Gerda smiled. It was the shard of glass. It made you see the world wrongly. But now it is gone. They sat together hand in hand, as if no time had passed at all, yet something had changed. They were no longer just two children playing in a garden. They were older, wiser, and their bond was stronger than ever. The townsfolk watched with wonder, whispering to one another about the miracle of love that had brought Kay back. But Gerda did not need their words. She knew the truth in her heart. The Snow Queen's palace had not been destroyed, but its power over Kay was broken forever. Love, pure and brave, had done what no magic could. And so, the story ended not with ice or sorrow, but with warmth, roses, and the promise of friendship that would never fade. For in the end, it was not strength, nor riches, nor magic that saved Kay. It was Gerda's love, steadfast, fearless, and true.